What's critical and different about my race and my campaign is that I really need to be able to mobilize that segment of the population that traditionally does not participate in electoral politics. And that means making believers out of people who the system has historically left behind. There you go. You hear me? Yay!
Yes. Okay. So if you could
just do it now.
Yes. So try pressing record for me.
Yep.
Awesome.
It's recording.
And then the number should just be, time should be going.
Yes, it's going.
Awesome. And then if you could just leave it on the keypad.
Yep.
And that should be perfect.
Great.
Okay. So we're just going to jump right into it. So if you could start by introducing yourself, your name, your age, if you'd like to, your race, your pronouns, and your gender.
Sure. So my name is Dianne Morales. I am 52 years old. I am an Afro-Boricua. Pronouns she, her, hers. And I am a female woman.
Incredible. So I wanted to start off this interview by first just talking about the current events. So COVID-19, I know that you are running for mayor, and we're going to get more into that, obviously, which is so exciting. And I just want to know your thoughts, like what's going on with COVID-19? What advice can you give us? And then I'll dive into more specific questions.
Yeah. So I want to thread the needle carefully here because I am not an epidemiologist or a doctor and don't want to give advice on some level, but I certainly have thoughts and opinions about all of this. I think that unfortunately, for better or for worse, COVID-19 is kind of, it's obviously it's a natural thing, right? It's a reflection, I think, of our lack of care for the environment. I think, Mother Nature is sending us a really strong message, unfortunately, in terms of the evolution of the virus. That being said, I think that one of the other things that has happened in this pandemic is that there's been sort of a glaring spotlight on the leadership void that we have in this country. And both nationally and in New York City locally, I think, which is really, really unfortunate. I think we had the opportunity to try to get ahead of this, and we missed that window, and we're still not doing enough to catch up. It is disturbing. It is frustrating. But it also creates, as I shared, I think it creates a sort of a mandate and an opportunity for a community to come together in a different kind of way around supporting one another and putting the needs of the collective above the individual needs, which I think is key, and figuring out ways to support each other and to take care of each other at a point in time where, the sort of government structures that are supposed to be responsible for that aren't really doing everything that they can do. So, that's the sort of my overall take on where we are right now.
Yeah. So when you talk about the government structures and what they can do better, if you were elected mayor, let's say during this time, what would you have done differently?
Yeah. So early last week, or maybe late the week before, I started calling for the closure of the schools. Our children, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because in New York City public schools in particular, you have some of the most vulnerable children and families in New York City, right? Both in terms of economic, poverty, communities of color and that kind of thing. And so I understand the pushback at the time was, so many kids rely on schools for meals and for, a safe space and childcare and those kinds of things. But I do think that we have in New York City have developed models and alternatives for that. And we've been doing that for years. And so I was really frustrated by our sort of delay in just pulling the trigger on that and switching over to those models, whether that's the summer school model, which was one of the things that was most sort of loudly advocated for. But the other thing is the community school model, which partners nonprofit organizations and healthcare and, critical services at a school location. So I think we had a model that we could have followed, and we could have done that much sooner because, I think that kids were interacting and transmitting and carrying, and that we didn't do as much to get ahead of this as we could have in a variety of different ways. I still think that the response is slow, right? There's vulnerable people in jails and prisons who are older, have pre-existing conditions. Prisons are essentially like a petri dish, right? And we know who's in those prisons. And so we're not providing for them or caring for them in the way that we should. The medical preparedness in terms of, we know this is going to be explosive. I appreciate the governor's leadership on this recently, but, the fine line that he's walking between like trying to manage it and trying to downplay it a little bit in terms of like, don't panic and whatever. I think it's past that point. And I'm not suggesting that we panic, but I think we need to be much more aggressive in terms of interventions, right? So I just think that there's quite a bit that we could be doing. And I'm not sure, I think in the effort to sort of keep people from panicking, we're not doing all of these things. And I think it's going to end up backfiring. Sorry, I can go off and, I've got a lot of thoughts on this.
No, for sure. It's so timely. Like I had to add it. I think it's a conversation we're going to be having for years to come. And it relates to everything, which is why I also want to talk about how might this global crisis of COVID-19 relate to the issues that the My Call Nana Project dives into. So already you talked about mass incarceration and how disproportionately different minority groups or people of different financial statuses are being affected. So specifically related to race, politics, gender, femininity, how does COVID-19 relate to us?
Yeah, well, I think this has really highlighted the lack of a social safety net. When you think about whether, we can talk about the sort of obvious populations, right? The homeless population, the incarcerated population, but really, the population that keeps the city running on the front lines, whether that be through service delivery or through running the subways or through running our schools or through, providing triage services in healthcare facilities. That population is women, and it is women of color. And it is often women of color who are heads of households and who are the single sort of provider for their families. And so our lack of having a safety net for those people and for folks in that community is going to have an exponential ripple effect. And so, we're moving to try to sort of put some protections in place, but we're moving so slowly. In terms of the economics of that. And then forget about the actual sort of physical health and protections, right? We don't have enough gloves. We don't have enough masks. So those people that are on the front lines, even now, providing services to keep people safe and healthy are at risk. And most of those people, again, are people of color and live just one paycheck away from complete financial insolvency. And so without addressing that, we're sort of teetering on the edge of sending this whole other, layer of the population into a much more vulnerable place. I mean, these families experience food insecurity, housing insecurity. All of these things are things that need to be factored in and need to be addressed. And we need to come up with a comprehensive solution that addresses all of those factors rather than continuing to sort of do one thing at a time. I think that's problematic. I think we're not being aggressive enough, proactive enough in getting ahead of this.
Dianne, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, famously infamous. back at a time where a lot of young white people fresh from college did not want to live here.
That's a good point. And then this is kind of a jump, but was there something in your childhood or something that happened that inspired you to want to be a mayor now?
No. I have never, ever in my life actually aspired to political office. This is new. What did happen in my childhood that I think started this path, however, was that I became aware, probably in high school, of the fact that I was getting access to much more elite educational opportunities than the kids in my community. As I sort of got farther up in my education, there were fewer and fewer kids in the classroom that looked like me. And I understood that I was accessing something that was different, and that was broadening opportunity for me in a way that my that my sort of peers did not have access to. And so I think before I developed the sort of critical analysis of what that meant and how, what it stemmed from, I definitely had a sense of both guilt and responsibility about doing something with that access that I had, and specifically doing something with it that involved increasing access for others and helping to sort of level the playing field and help people overcome barriers and challenges. So I think that, ultimately that is at the root of why I decided to run for office. But it certainly is it's not an idea that's been around in my head for a really long time. Actually, I rejected that. I rejected it for almost a decade before deciding that maybe it was time for me to explore.
And what made you reject it? Like, why were you for a decade?
I've always believed that the real way to create change was sort of in community and with community. And I never wanted to engage in what felt like the, the lack of sort of genuine representation in politics, or what felt like the political games. I think, though, that in recent years, you start, whether you talk about the election of the current president, or you talk about the devastation of Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, and I got very involved in that. It became clear to me that as successful as I might be in my work in the community, there are structures and systems in place that continue to perpetuate the status quo, and that it's, for me, the ultimate act of a democracy is for someone like me or someone like us to run for public office. And the idea that we need to claim government as a representation of us. And I don't want to say take it back, because I don't think it's ever really belonged to us, but make it ours. And that we have a right to do that. And that it's only through doing that we're actually going to kind of create the change that our communities need. And so, I think all of those things together kind of like made me think, well, why not? Why not? And why not now? And why not me?
So staying to that same point, like the government needs more people like us, right? We need to make it ours, right? So how do you think your perspective as mayor might be different as a woman of color?
Sure. Lots of ways.
Everywhere.
Yeah. Like I said, having grown up as, my parents both came here from Puerto Rico. They came here separately. I'm the youngest of three daughters, first generation to attend college. I think there's a uniqueness in those experiences. There's a uniqueness in what I described in sort of going through the education system and recognizing the difference in access points and opportunities associated with that. Later on in my life, I became a single mom of two. And I think navigating that, the economics of that, navigating, getting them education, they both had learning differences. So struggling through that and recognizing that I had education, I had advocacy, I had networks that I could tap into that made things a little bit more accessible to me and my kids, but still were so hard that I couldn't imagine what it would be like for anybody who didn't have those things. And then through the course of my work in serving as the executive of a variety of organizations that provide services, and whether it's anti-poverty or education or career stuff, to vulnerable communities that have often been forgotten and left behind, understanding what it takes to sort of navigate those things, understanding how those systems actually act as barriers to many communities, and creating, workarounds or, finding the loophole around things to make things work. I think all of those things, all of those experiences together give me a unique perspective on the lived experiences of the majority of our communities. I also think that my decades of experience in the front lines at the community level, elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder with people that look like me and were invested in making change.
When we were first talking about the Michael Fernanda Project, right, this topic of hair has grown to be such an endearing and exciting and frustrating and saddening topic in so many different ways, right, for the Black female community. It's complicated. It relates to the political. It relates to the racial, relates to the gender, relates to sexuality, all these things, right? So now running for mayor, your relationship to your hair, how can you tell me a little bit about it? Maybe also diving into your relationship to your hair as a child, how that's grown, if you have a relationship with your hair.
Yeah, I love my hair. Wow, so that's a good, I love that. I love that we're having this conversation and putting it out there. It's so important that our community create our narrative around this and own it. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. And back in the day, you wore your hair in pigtails or whatever, up in some way until the day where you were old enough to get it relaxed or pressed. And I remember being little and really, really being self-conscious about my hair. That probably didn't start until about fourth grade, right? Where I was sort of like, in Spanish, the expression is pelo malo, like bad hair. And the same thing applies to, our physical structure, physical attributes as well. But, the hair it almost felt like hair walked into a room first, right? And so I remember kind of looking forward to the day when I'd be old enough to be taken to get my hair done. And so I spent years, that happened, I think I got that done in fifth grade, at the end of fifth grade. And I spent years after that going through the routine. It's, Sundays, you wash your hair, you put the big fat rolos in it. And then you put the doobie, right? The wrap around your hair, which I never learned how to do actually, but my mom was really good at that stuff. And I lived like that. I lived with that for decades. It actually wasn't until the summer after my son was born, my son who's about to be 22, that I was just like, I can't do all this, right? New mom, dealing with, I was a full-time doctoral student at the time and trying to do my hair. That just was not going to work. And so I cut my hair off. I went almost like really, really close in the back, and then I had like curls in the front. And at the time, the length of our hair matters too. Like, culturally, you get sort of all sorts of definitions about that. And so I remember being criticized about having my hair short, about having it curly. And it took a lot for me to sort of learn to kind of tune that out and just take pride. The other thing is once you go natural, you have to learn all sorts of different ways to take care of your hair, like all the rituals and all the products and everything changes. So like you're starting from ground zero in terms of learning how to care for yourself. I have, been really blessed over the last 10, 15 years or so, in terms of like having hairstylists that understand our hair, right? In terms of a haircut. If you want a little color or a little, you want to sass it up a little bit. It's different. And there hasn't been, the industry for us is still a fairly new industry. But I am at the stage where, I love my curls. I do see it as part of my identity. And I do see it as part of a political statement about who I am and loving myself and loving from whence I have come. And I understand that not everybody is as evolved. And I'm willing to help, educate and bring people along. But I am no longer prepared to let people hold me back. People's opinions hold me back, or people create their own definitions of who I am based on that.
That's really awesome. Was there a moment when you realized, right? So you said like when you had your first child, right? So Ben, he's 22. So you were in like your 30s at that point, right? So one of the things that the My Colorful Hair Project wants to do is we want young girls like at 2, at 4, at 5 years old saying, I love my curls and I love my hair and this is who I am, right? Do you have any thoughts or advice on how someone can have that realization before turning 30?
Before they're an adult?
Yeah.
Yes. I think so much of that is about our generation, your generation, right? What we model, what we talk about, overcoming stereotypes, and that kind of profiling, and just being strong and powerful and embracing that, right? I think that we still have a long way to go, right? The amount of shaming that's happening nationally, at schools or in workplaces around these issues is still highly problematic. But what I think is powerful and promising is the extent to which those things are being highlighted, and, the extent to which there's a sort of increasing elevated voice rising against that, right? And the extent to which there is a hair industry that is growing for us and by us. I think that's really important. And I think, we can't shield completely our children from the world at large. But we can do quite a bit to help focus and shift the messaging and the narrative that our children hear. And I think that's really, really important. Had I had, truth be told, part of the messaging that I got was obviously from society at large, but also from my own household.
What are some of the things that were?
Well, my mom has quote unquote good hair. Beautiful, long, flowing dark hair is what I remember when I was growing up. And my dad has, had an afro. And I don't think there weren't any ever intentional sort of direct, like, you've got bad hair. But, obviously my hair was harder to comb and, and to manage and style. And there were so many subtle messages. My parents have come a long way since I was a child, and wouldn't do or say some of the things that they did or said back then. But they, there were conversations about my bad hair. There were conversations about, our blackness or lack thereof, or arguments, right? Listen, you can't, look at me and even begin to assume that there isn't any blackness in me. Like, I am a Black Latina, right? But there was resistance to that, right? For all of the stereotypes and all of the internalized racist reasons that we've all been exposed to in some way, shape, or form. So, I think it's a slow process, but I do think that there is an important role that we are playing that other, and the generations since us, and I'm saying us, and I don't know what generation I fall into, baby boomer maybe, that we're playing in terms of helping future generations overcome these stigmas.
Yeah. And then we were talking about, I think it was a month ago, right, when we first started talking about you coming on the My Colorful Nana project, how there are some people who want you to change your hair as you're running for mayor. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. There's been talk about me letting my hair grow. There's been talk about, different styling. More in sort of, to be fair, it's often posed as like a question, like, would you think about this, or would you, or do you think that this might, be something that people, it's very interesting, right? Like people are careful about it. And I get it. Like, and I, listen, the U.S. isn't ready for a woman president. Maybe New York City is not ready for a person with curly hair. Right? I don't know. But to the point that I made earlier, like, this is who I am. And part of my campaign is representation. And representation of communities that have historically not been represented and have been left behind. And so it would be hypocritical of me to change something fundamental about who I am and who I hope to represent in response to those kinds of comments and remarks. So, with me, the value of my campaign, the values of my campaign is kind of like reflecting my community and representing my community and not being caught up in these other things. And so it's really important to me that I stay true to that as I move this process forward.
Yeah. And then that's awesome. And then what do you think, like a young girl looking at someone in a place of power who has curly hair that looks like theirs, like what kind of messaging does that promote?
Yeah. I mean, I think, going to my point of like wanting to reflect the community, I think it's so powerful and so important for young people to see someone that looks like them in positions of leadership, people who are unabashed about who they are and what they look like, who are proud of who they are and what they look like. Part of some of our community's greatest challenges is the fact that we haven't seen ourselves represented in that way, whether that's, in the media or in elected positions or on television. We are here. We are not going away. And we have the right to claim our space in all of those places. And so, if nothing else, if what I am able to do is to hold a mirror up to young women to let them see what might be possible, then I am all here for it.
I love that. So one of the things that I did right after you accepted the interview, I emailed a bunch of our generous thinkers. Our generous thinkers are just like, you're a generous thinker, different people we interview or who are just a part of our team. And I asked them, do you guys have any questions that you would want me to ask Dianne? I was like, this is going to be one of our biggest interviews. So like, I would love that. So some of the things that they asked are, how would you use your role to advocate for young queer people of color in New York City public schools, especially those in low-income communities?
Yeah, awesome. I love generous thinkers. So listen, I think so much there's two main places that people get educated, right? One is at home and the other one is at school. And I don't think that our schools do enough to educate kids about, gender differences, sexuality differences, identity differences. And I think it's really important for us to embrace that in the classroom. And that means creating curriculum so that that is an active part of what we're teaching, not a passive thing, not something that, kids learn from each other, but something that we are taking a proactive role in teaching, educating, demystifying, destigmatizing. It is our responsibility to create a safe space for everybody. And so, that is something I think is important. I think training teachers differently so that they are embracing that. And if they, if they're not able to embrace that, then I don't know that they belong in the front of a classroom, right? Our children need to feel accepted. They need to feel safe. No one's going to learn anything if they're not feeling individually safe and accepted. And so that is something I feel very, very strongly about. And part of that involves, I think, engaging the community in the creation of that curriculum and what that needs to look like and how it gets rolled out. Having people, again, representation matters. Having people, concerted efforts to make sure that some of our teachers reflect what we're teaching as well. I think that's also really important. And really making it something that is an acceptable topic. Like, it's so taboo, it's so hidden. All of that contributes to the stigma. All of that contributes to all of the mental health challenges that our children and youth are experiencing around these issues. And that is actually killing us. And that is unacceptable to me as someone who has done so much work in that community and worked so hard to help contribute to the self-acceptance and the sort of community safe spaces. That is definitely something that's really important to me. And I think we have a lot of progress to make on that front.
Yeah. So on that same point, so the queer community, right, in New York City, do you have any thoughts or campaigning or systems of advocacy that you would do in relation to young queer people of color?
Yeah, I mean, I think aside from the sort of education acceptance, the safety issue, the violence against the queer community is unacceptable. I think we need to find ways to create more safe spaces for people to come together in community that aren't necessarily, all bars and clubs, right? There's a whole sort of underground life there. And I have plenty of friends who are part of that community. And it's not the healthiest of communities, right? There should be spaces for the queer community to come together that do not involve a bar or club, right? Increasing access to spaces, and also just increasing integration, right? The ability for people, for the queer community to feel welcome and to feel like they can claim any public space in New York City, and that they can be safe in any public space in New York City, public or private, actually. Because I think, I don't think we can exempt our private businesses from those rules and expectations. So I think that's part of it. And again, I think, one of the key ways to do that is to involve the queer community in the creation of those policies, those structures, those, systems. I'm a strong believer in the community having the answers to its own challenges, and the community having, some of the best solutions and the best leadership. And so it would be critical to me not to sort of come down from on high and dictate what the right things are. I have some sense of what we need to do differently, but I would want to partner with leaders, and all folks in the queer community in order to figure that out.
I'm wondering, what are the hardships of advocacy, or what has been most difficult when campaigning? I know COVID-19, of course, has played a role in this, but beyond that as well.
Yeah. So, for a non-traditional candidate like me, a woman of color who's never been part of the political machine, there's a little bit of a catch-22, right? Because the way traditional politics has sort of assessed candidates or embraced candidates is based on sort of a measure of what they call viability. And that's a combination of both name recognition and fundraising. But it's interesting because it's primarily name recognition sort of within a bubble of what they call the chattering class, which are all the people that are already involved in politics. So that's how it sort of narrows who gets in, who gets access, right? And so when you hold me up against those criteria, I don't really check the boxes. So there's been a lot of conversation around my viability as a candidate. And there's been a lot of attempts for others to define my viability as a candidate. And part of what makes that possible is the low voter turnout rates, too, of non-traditional communities, right? Because low-income communities of color don't vote at the same rates. And so, my response to that is, I continue to say, as I was talking about the hair or whatever, I'm not going to let anybody else define my viability as a candidate. I believe that I could hold my skills and experience up against any of the other candidates, and I would be damn competitive. I would even argue in some ways more so. But what's critical and different about my race and my campaign is that I really need to be able to mobilize that segment of the population that traditionally does not participate in electoral politics. And that means making believers out of people who the system has historically left behind, right? Making them believers enough that they actually are willing to participate in the process. Whether that means by, signing petitions or being willing to donate $1 or, showing up to vote. The surest way for my candidacy to make sure that we get heard and that it resonates is to mobilize and to create a movement from among people that really are ready for change. And that understand what it means for them to take that power in order to create that change.
Got it. Awesome. And then my last question, which I ask all of our generous thinkers, why do you think it's important for the Myoclonal Project to exist, but also to expand and continue these conversations?
I think I was so excited to hear about this project because I think it's really, really important, again, to rewrite the narrative in a way that we can control it, right? It is our story to tell. And so we should be the ones telling it, and creating a platform that elevates that storytelling and that enables us to share it with the broader collective is critical and can play such an important role in instilling that pride that we were talking about for the next generation in who we are and what we look like and how we style our hair, and recording that and, documenting it in a way that is different from our sort of oral history traditions, I think is also really important because it becomes something that can't be rewritten by someone else. And I think it's important for us to be able to own our own narrative. So I'm really, really grateful to you for coming up with this idea and this project and doing this work.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to share, or is there any other way that people can maybe get connected in terms of voting or anything like support you in any way? Sure.
So the campaign has really, truth be told, the campaign's going to take a little bit of a hit right now, a little bit or a lot. Because of the virus situation and because we've actually shifted our focus to creating resources for the community, finding ways to connect people to counter this sort of sense of social isolation that people might be feeling. So we're working on creating virtual communities so people can come together and connect, so that people can find out what resources are available, and also so that people can help others where they can. So I would direct people to our website. It's Dianne, DIANNE.NYC. There is a banner at the top of the website that takes you to a page on the website that lists all of the resources that we are putting together for the community around this stuff. There's ways to get involved in terms of volunteering and helping with these efforts. And people can follow my social media as well. Dianne Morales, 4 NYC, in most cases on Twitter, Insta, and Facebook, and spread the word. I think, if there's anything compelling about my candidacy, my values, or what I'm advocating for, it's folks like you and your generation that I think could help tip the scales. And so I would appreciate any kind of, sharing and support that you and your community want to offer.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining the My Colorful Nana Project, Dianne. We wish you the best on Election Day. And thank you all for listening. Thank you for thinking generously, and we'll see you next month.